Hey y'all, so this is going to be the Achilles in Vietnam, Chapter 5, Berserk, Guided Notes. Again, I want to encourage you to make sure that you are taking notes as well while you listen and watch the presentation. Again, this is material that you'll be tested on, so it is very important and it is crucial for you to have this information. So make sure you're taking notes and we will go ahead and begin. So, Chapter 5 in Achilles in Vietnam, Shea writes about something called the Berserk state. Berserk. So, he defines or describes a situation when a soldier would be in the Berserk state is when they single-handedly rout the enemy. They're oftentimes in the grip of a special state of mind, body, and social disconnection. So that is really important, of course, for our study of Achilles and the Iliad, and of course it applies to the experiences of Vietnam veterans. Of course, the Berserk state for Achilles happens in the middle of his Aristeia, beginning in chapter 21. It is that episode, that moment where he completes glorious deeds. Berserk is actually an Old Norse word, so if you're familiar with Thor, Loki, the Norse countries, this is where that word comes from. It's defined as when frenzied warriors go into battle. Traditionally, they would either go into battle naked or they would go in without armor. And so they go in with almost a godlike or beast-like fury. So, of course, that is a Norse word. It's not a Greek word, but Shea thinks it's really useful to describe the state that Achilles is in 21 through 22. 20 through 22, and the Iliad, and also the experience that his veterans have. So, of course, we've talked about this a little bit in the context of the Iliad, and Shea sort of spells out a list of what triggers the Berserk state. So there's several of them. The first is betrayal, insult, or humiliation by a leader. Okay, one that we focused heavily on, the death of a special comrade. So we see this in the Iliad with the death of Patroclus. Being wounded is another time where Shea's veterans talk about how this experience of being wounded or being overrun, surrounded, or trapped sort of triggers this huge change in their personality. Seeing dead comrades who have been mutilated by the enemy, especially when they were a special comrade. And then another time is when someone is unexpectedly delivered from certain death. So they have a close call with death, something they should not have survived. This changes that person. And so Shea mentions that in the Iliad there are 5 Aristeias. Diomedes has one, Agamemnon, Hector, Patroclus, and then of course finally Achilles. All 5 of those Aristeias each have one of those triggers that he lists off. However, Achilles is the most intense of the Aristeias. He's the one that gets fully into the Berserk state. So in his Berserk state, Achilles kills, slaughters people, huge, gigantic number of people while he's fighting this battle in the Berserk state. And it's motivated, of course, by the death of his special comrade, by the death of Patroclus. And so we need to talk a little bit about the two cultures that were different in the Iliad and the American Army Marine Corps during Vietnam. So Greek culture specifically approved of revenge killing someone who had taken the life of a family member or sort of that philos type friend. It was not a passionate killing. That was not emotional. It was strictly duty bound. It was something that you had to do because of your family. You were duty bound to revenge that death. Now, contrast that to the training that soldiers received in preparation to go to the Vietnam War, or even the encouragement that they would receive while they were in the field. It is on record. Part of the official response to a soldier losing someone that was close to them was sort of this mantra: don't get sad, get even. Don't get sad, get even. So do not have an emotional response to this. I'm sorry, do not have a grieving response to something that has happened. Use violence as a way to suppress grief. Use violence as a way to suppress grief. And we see that played out with Achilles. Now, if you think about it, this, of course, is a terrible, terrible way to deal with issues. There's no closure. There's no actual reckoning with grief. It just leads to destruction, leads to violence. And of course, that was one of the things that American soldiers were encouraged to do in Vietnam. So this has had drastic, long-term effects on Vietnam soldiers. Okay, so the next thing we need to talk about are certain characteristics of the berserk state. So we're going to go through about 4 or 5 of them, beginning with the two first characteristics are the most important. So when Achilles is in the berserk state, and when Vietnam soldiers, soldiers in Vietnam were in the berserk state, first of all, they were beast-like. Now, when we say like someone is a beast, they're animal-like, right? Animals don't have morals. Okay, they don't care about what's right and wrong. They just do. They have impulses. And so when a person is in this berserk state, there is no right and wrong. They just do. It's impulse. A beast is someone who would be below human morals. Okay, they don't care about human morals. All they care is about killing, right? Like an animal, like a predator would. Okay, so that beast-like state is very important. Second characteristic is they feel that they are godlike. Okay, and of course we see this in the Iliad with Achilles. He is godlike. He feels like he is above every other hero, every other human being. And we see when he tries to fight Scamander, the river god, he feels like he can match up with an actual god. He feels like he is above humans and heroes, both in like physical prowess and strength, warrior ability, but also very, very importantly, he feels like he is invulnerable. He feels like he cannot be hurt. And that is a huge thing that is seen in Vietnam veterans when they get into the berserk state. They feel like nothing can harm them. There are stories that Shay references where soldiers go into combat and they stand up in the middle of an ambush, in the middle of a firefight. They're not concerned. They feel like nothing can hurt them because they are like a god. Okay, the third characteristic is that the berserk state always has this element of trying to revive the dead. Oftentimes, when someone is in the berserk state, they are triggered by the loss of a special comrade. We saw that in chapter 3 and in the Iliad with the death of Patroclus. And so, by killing, it's almost like the person is keeping someone else alive. It's like not letting their memory die. So killing them is almost, or killing other people is almost a way of honoring them, taking revenge on the people that killed them. And so there's also a little bit of that justice element there as well. You are obtaining justice for them by killing and attacking not specifically the person that killed them, but the group of people that are responsible for killing them. And so in the Iliad for Achilles, that's Trojans, and specifically it's Hector, and for the Vietnam veterans, it would have been Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army soldiers. So that's there as well. We see, this is sort of a larger category, but we see that there's a significant lack of restraint when soldiers are in the berserk state, right? Achilles wants to go out immediately and fight. And this is important. This lack of restraint is incredibly important because he disregards safety. He doesn't care about wearing armor. He wants to go out immediately. And this is something that Shay observes in the testimonies of Vietnam veterans. They would go into war, into battle rather, and they wouldn't be wearing their helmets. They wouldn't be wearing flak jackets because nothing mattered to them anymore. They didn't care. They've already said that they feel like they are dead. Okay, they feel numb. And so they feel like they are invulnerable, they are godlike, or they are below humans, or they are beast-like. And so personal safety doesn't matter for them. There's that lack of restraint, that lack of caring about what human morals are. We see that when Achilles mutilates the body of Hector, and that's a really important scene as well, to see that lack of restraint. That is a wrong thing to do in both our culture, but more importantly in context in Greek culture. But Achilles doesn't have that restraint anymore because he's beast-like, he is godlike, he is both above and below those human morals. So those characteristics are very important. Finally, we need to talk about the differences between the American Aristeas and the Aristeas of the Iliad. So, one key difference is their initial beginning. In the Iliad, the Aristeas begin immediately after a triggering event. So, one of those events that I talked about in the previous slide happens, the hero reacts, and then immediately they're in this berserk state. Achilles, of course, waits a little bit to go out and fight, but that's only because people are restraining him after he's told about Patroclus' death. Now, the real context for Americans in Vietnam is that sometimes, or oftentimes, as Shay found, there's a long time after major triggering events. And there's not necessarily just one, there are several. Okay, so something happens, triggers them, time passes, okay, they feel numb, then something else triggers them, and then that is when the berserk state happens. It could be weeks, could be months, days after the first triggering event happens, but it's not a sudden explosion. That sort of decay isn't the right word. That sort of sliding down into this numbness happens over time, and we don't see that in the Iliad. And finally, one of the other key differences between American Aristeas and the Aristeas of the Iliad is that in the Iliad, those Aristeas are short. Achilles is upset for like a few days, and that's the longest one. The other Aristeas, Diomedes, Agamemnon, Hector, Patroclus, they have Aristeas that last hours. That's it. When they're done, it's over. Okay, they go back to camp. Or in Patroclus' case, he's killed, but they're just done. And they're back to normal soldiers. Shay has found that is one thing that is completely inaccurate about Homer. American soldiers, when they experience this berserk state, it happens for a long period of time. It's not hours, it's not days, it's months and months. And in some cases, American soldiers have experienced that this is a thing that does not end, right? They go to war, they experience these triggers of the berserk state, they're in it, and really they're never really able to come down from it. And of course, that would play into the post-traumatic stress disorder. That's important. But it happens over a long, long, long period of time. Okay? Okay, so that's going to wrap up the notes over Chapter 5, Berserk. Make sure you're able to define Berserk. Make sure you're able to describe the major characteristics of it, the triggers, and the length. Compare that to the Iliad and to the American experience. So that's going to be it. As always, there will be a discussion post posted. Make sure you contribute, add to that conversation, and then respond to a classmate. So yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or ask me tomorrow in class. That is it.